The mayor is on his way. Hopefully he's not snowed in somewhere just yet. I believe we have a Boy Scout. Young man, if you'd like to come forward and lead us in the pledge, please.
Where do I stand? Okay. What do I say?
Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hang on just a minute. Could you come forward and tell us who you are and what troop you're from?
My name is Daniel Gonzalez and I'm from Troop 226.
And why are you here tonight?
For the Communications Merit Badge.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you. Thanks for coming. Okay. We're going to move around a little bit until the mayor gets here. So since we have emergency management folks ready to get back to work, we're going to move ahead with the transportation item number 7. And that is approval for mayor and city administrator to sign the updated Intergovernmental Agreement, IGA, with Johns Creek for the intersection improvements at Nesbit, Ferry, and Brumbelow roads. Mr. Asenbrack.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. We have an active emergency operations center right now, and we are monitoring the weather very closely. I know that is of interest to you tonight. So I appreciate your allowing me to present this item to you early so I can get back to the EOC. So the item is the intergovernmental agreement that we have with our neighboring city of Johns Creek. I have a graphic here for you. So this graphic shows the eastern portion of our city. This is Nesbit Ferry Road, and this is Brumbelow Road. Nesbit Ferry Road represents a city boundary between the two cities. Johns Creek has expressed an interest to improve this intersection. The way that we can do that is through a traffic signal. It does warrant for traffic signals. Johns Creek has expressed the interest, such a strong interest that they are willing to pay for this improvement. And so they will be paying for the improvement of this intersection within the city limits of Roswell. We have stipulated in this intergovernmental agreement, basically it's a contract between us and our joint sister city on sort of the mechanics on how this will be done, the standards that we expect, because at the end of the day, this improvement will reside within the city of Roswell. So we've discussed this at committee. I think you've had a chance to review the IGA. I understand that the city of Johns Creek has already approved this IGA on their side, so they're waiting for us to approve it on our side. If you approve it tonight, I will notify them, and I expect that they will be interested in beginning the construction right away. So it involves, basically this is just a concept. The concept involves a left turn lane from Nesbit Ferry into Brumbelow, a left turn lane from Brumbelow onto southbound Nesbit Ferry, some other road improvements to improve the sight distance coming down here to the south. It'd be a mast arm intersection with a crosswalk. It's a fairly simple intersection improvement. And the city of Johns Creek and I discussed the concept of one day turning this into a roundabout. we agreed that we would pursue a joint venture with Georgia Department of Transportation for a roundabout, but they did not want to wait for that process to go forward. They would like to see this intersection signalized as what we'll call an interim improvement until such time as we can get funding and then revert this signalized intersection into a roundabout. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does the council have any questions?
I know that council approved this once before, and we entered into this arrangement. So what is different about this MOU compared to the previous one?
I'm not sure we had a memorandum of understanding at the time come to council.
That's correct.
At that point in time, it went to committee, but now we have a formal written agreement. That's probably the only significant difference.
That's correct, Mayor. So this formalizes, we didn't have a formal agreement before.
Okay.
We just had a set of plans.
Okay, so is there anything in this that makes us think that we will not come to a better conclusion than the last time?
I'm very confident that if they honor the terms of the agreement, as we will honor the terms of the agreement, that the city of Roswell will be well served by this agreement.
We got their attention last time.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion for approval. Now, Councilmember Diamond, is there a second? Second by Councilmember Price. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That's Diamond, DiPolito, Eigelhart, Price, and Orleans in favor. All opposed?
Abstaining.
Councilmember Wynn is abstaining, passes with 5 votes with 1 abstention. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
To approve.
There's a motion for approval by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilmember Orleans. Anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We have a reappointments. Mr. Davidson, would you read the name of the folks we're looking for to be reappointed?
These are approval of reappointments to the following boards. Brian Chamberlain to the Planning Commission for 3 years. These are all 3 years, actually. Roberto Paredes to the Design Review Board. Judy Meir to the Historic Preservation Commission. Richard Hallberg to the Historic Preservation Commission. Alex Paulson to the Historic Preservation Commission. Hayden Branch to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Glenn Maggiola to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And for a 4-year term, Dave Schmidt to the Downtown Development Authority.
Do I have a motion to approve that slate of appointments? Motion by Councilman Orleans. Councilmember Price.
Was Judy Meir included on that list?
Yes, ma'am, to a 3-year term to the
Okay.
Historic Preservation Commission.
Right, I didn't hear you say it, that's all.
I have a motion to approve the slate. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Councilmember Diamond. Is any council members have any questions or discussion of that motion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We have a Community Cultural Plan Steering Committee appointments. Councilmember Wynn, do you want to address that issue?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. This is for the approval of the Community Culture Planning Steering Committee appointments. This is going to be help the culture planning group to decide what we're going to do with our culture, arts in
Wait a minute, is that
Roswell.
admin?
And so,
Wait a minute, Councilmember Wynn, that's admin, I apologize.
oh, I'm sorry. Well,
Okay, let's switch to admin.
hey, look, I'm just following.
We're-
I'm following your.
I understand, that's my fault, but
That's how
I
come I
will-
was stuttering a little bit here because I didn't know what I was.
It is under Recreation and Parks?
It's under admin.
Wait a minute, let's have a ruling here.
Well,
I'll just keep on going
the
if you want.
project manager, it's being managed by Recreation and Parks. The project is being managed by Recreation and Parks.
Then it's down
The-
there.
The Roswell Arts Commission, the liaison is from the administration department. So it just depends on how you
Well,
want
I'm going
to
to
couch the
turn to the
project.
Councilman Eichelhardt, are you prepared on this one?
I think so, but
All right.
I was willing to go along with however we were
You're
going.
liaison, so I'm going to refer to you. I got confused.
Because as people out there may not know, we all just switched liaison roles in the last week, and we're not really sure where we are, probably. And this one in particular has a little bit of everything. But as Councilmember Wynn was saying, that this is a new group that's going to be helping us on our community cultural and arts plan, and we have a steering committee that's going to be working a lot. I've just seen the schedule today. That was my one introduction to the group. So this is a large number of people from the community representing a wide range of activities and professions and interests. And do we need to, am I going to keep going, or is somebody else going to say anything?
Do we have
from departments?
I believe we have a slate of
Yes, we do.
nominations.
Should I run through those?
Yes, please.
Okay. We have the members, and I won't go into everybody's affiliations, but those to be nominated are Rochelle Muka, Larry Wiseman, Morgan Timmis, Lonnie Mims, Sally Johnson, Deborah Ewing, Becky Hawkins, Aaron, I had this earlier today, Aaron Deere, Maura Brumley, Donna Smythe, Maggie Davis, Cheryl Small, Kendra Smith, Jasper Tanner, Kendra Cox, and myself as the council liaison. I was trying to remember what that abbreviation meant. RAC. Okay, there it goes. All right, so that is the nomination for the members for this.
Do we have a motion to approve those nominees?
One other piece, thank you for, see, it is a group effort here. We have two alternates just in case some of those can't serve or something happens, and it's Trip Lyles and Michael Haddon.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept those nominations?
That is a motion for those.
That's a motion by Councilman Eichelhardt to accept those nominations. Second by Councilman Orleans. Any questions or discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time we'll go to Councilmember Becky Wynn, Community Development Liaison, for her agenda.
We're right on this one. Okay, first one is approval of city sponsorship for the historic Roswell Criterium on Sunday, April 27, 2014, and this will be Alice Wakefield to present. Ms. Wakefield.
This is a request to approve the sponsorship for the Roswell Criterium on behalf of Bike Roswell. This matter was before the committee on January the 29th, at which time committee agreed to move forward the sponsorship in the amount of $17,582. At the time, based on my math, I believe that we were within budget. However, after double checking that, there is a amount of $1,458 in which, if this is approved at this requested amount, we will be over budget. I'm asking this body to, if you want to approve the overage, we would ask that you approve a budget amendment from the general fund operating contingency to cover that cost. If not, you would be approving the sponsorship at $16,124.10.
Any questions? Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So we're looking at $1,458, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am, for this event.
Okay, then I'm going to make the motion for, to approve the sponsorship in the amount of $17,582.17, bringing forward $1,458 out of our general fund budget to make up the deficit.
Motion by Councilmember Wynn to approve the $17,000. Is there a second? Councilmember DePolito.
Just a clarification on the motion, it was the general fund operating contingency that we're moving the money from?
Is that correct, Ms. Love? Yes, it is.
In that case, I second.
Second by Councilmember DePolito. Any questions by council or comments before I open it to the floor? Be brief, floor. Any comments from the floor? All in favor? Any further discussion before we take a vote? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We'll hear briefly from Bike Roswell just to tell us the good things that are coming, so folks in the audience can hear it in addition. You can take your victory lap. But now comes the hard work.
You're right, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your support in committee the other day and again this evening. Bike Roswell has undertaken the criterium for the first time this year, and we couldn't do it without all of you. And like Mayor Wood said, now the hard work starts. We are now official, and we can start tomorrow morning looking for more sponsors, and we hope you will help us with that. The Roswell Criterium is a traditional bicycle race. We hope to grow it year by year into a huge Roswell Cycling Festival, which we can all be proud of. We can already be proud of the Criterium because it's the biggest one east of the Mississippi River in the United States. So just one more thing that we can be proud of in Roswell. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bike Roswell. You can bicycle home now, or hopefully drive your car. It's a little unsafe after dark. Continue,
Okay.
Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to skip down to number 6, which is the final plat, 201-400-143, 1580 Old Alabama Road, Roswell Manor, Old Alabama Holdings, LLC, Jim Jacobi, land lot 612, and be presented by Mr. Townsend.
Thank you very much. This is a final plat approval of a subdivision off Old Alabama Road. This approval was originally for townhomes before the downturn in the economy. It is now being built into single-family homes that are attached by a breezeway between them. The final plat is in conformance with our requirements, and staff recommends approval.
Councilmember Wynn.
Mr. Townsend, I do have one question. I have to refresh my memory on this one. When they did the private streets, they did build it to our standards?
Correct.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve this final plat.
Motion for approval of the final plat by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we're going to go to number 4, approval of an ordinance to create the Unified Development Code and map. And since Councilmember Nancy Diamond has been working on this since day one, I am going to turn this agenda item over to her.
We'll begin with a reading of the ordinance.
Thank you. This is an ordinance of the City of Roswell, Georgia, to create a Unified Development Code, UDC, and map. Now therefore, the mayor and council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority, do hereby ordain and enact this Unified Development Code and map, its articles, chapters, sections, and Appendix A, attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Further, it shall be unlawful for any person to change or amend by addition or deletions any part, portion of such code, or to insert or delete pages or portions thereof, or to alter or tamper with such code in any manner whatsoever, which cause the law of the City of Roswell to be misrepresented thereby. And if approved, this will be the second reading of the ordinance.
Brad, you may proceed.
This is the second reading of the Unified Development Code. I'm probably going to be more sitting over there at the computer. I'm going to go through the text changes that were discussed on Saturday. This is the sheet that most of everyone was left at your then we'll go to Councilman Eigelhart's changes, his list that was going through there. Also, you will have a buffer table, the height map, and then the actual listing of the complete map changes. So stop me at any time. I don't think we have to go through a myriad of these unless we have discussion or policy changes that you think. Lee is here.
So as I understand it, you're going to be going through all of these, and at what point in time do you want council to respond?
Anytime along
If
the
they have any
discussion.
questions
If they
or
have a
comments.
question or policy that they'd like to interject.
All right. Before we proceed, Councilmember and Councilmember Diamond, I understand that would you tell the audience what your plan is on voting tonight?
Yes, given that we had 2 work sessions this week, Monday and Saturday, and I would like to make sure that everybody has some time to review whatever changes that we're going to talk about tonight. So what we're looking at is basically a draft of the second reading, but I will be asking to defer the actual vote on second reading to the 24th of this month.
So we will have 2 opportunities for the public to be heard. We're going to be presenting your proposal, or Councilmember Wynn's proposal and your proposal tonight. We'll hear comments from the audience. We'll hear comments and questions from council, but we're going to be deferring it for a vote for the 27th. 24th, at the next regular council meeting. And at that regular council meeting, there will be another public hearing
Yes, sir.
and further discussion and an opportunity to amend.
Yes.
All right, you may proceed.
What I've placed on the screen is the beginning of the spreadsheet that was discussed at first reading. All of these changes were included as part of the first reading. One of the discussions that was taking place today is in this area of the section, which is number 1, page 3.5, dealing with the suburban residential. It was adopted on first reading to put this wording back into the intent statement for the RS6 and RS4, and that's how it was approved on first reading. I believe placed at your seat this evening was wording from Councilman Orland's, which I have actually typed in to the resolution. So this area needs to be discussed this evening. He's asking for the term suburban residential to be removed from RS6, RS4, and RCC, and add language, other areas as defined by the comp plan, only in exceptional situations.
What I would like to do as far as the order is to have the presentation, any questions the council may have about the presentation, then a public hearing to get comments from the floor, and then discussion by council.
Okay.
And again, I understand Councilmember Wynn and Diamond will be asking for a motion to defer the vote.
Okay.
So, this isn't, I want to
run.
give a public hearing before we get into debate, but if there are questions you go along, I want Councilmember, if they've got any questions, he's going, please raise your hand or interrupt if I don't see your hand up. Please proceed.
Do we want to discuss this item anymore, but I'll go around?
I think we're going to hold.
Okay.
Just for the audience, they need to understand the issue. If what were the 2 different proposals
To leave
that are
suburban-
being considered? The first one is approved by the first reading, and the counter by the proposal by Councilmember Orleans.
Correct. The way it was adopted under the first reading was to put suburban residential as a allowable category in the intent statement for RS6 and RS4. Councilman Orland's alternative is to remove that language and put in other areas as defined by the comp plan, only in exceptional situations.
Please proceed with the rest of the presentation.
This area is the further approved under first reading. This is the areas for the concurrent variance language adopted and added by the city attorney. The area in green was also adopted under first reading. The area in blue were locations which are being proposed for second reading. The item number 2 was discussed of providing a double row of hedges. This was the language taken exactly from the city of Alpharetta's requiring a double row of hedges. As you can see, some of the items indicated no action. The buffer matrix is something we'll discuss and bring up separately. This is in item number 10. This is language related to the Appendix A. We added clarifying language that indicates when a property abuts a protected district, the site plan shall be reviewed and approved by the mayor and council. I believe that was language Councilman Despolito wanted clarifying as part of being in the prior conditions of approval. This is the language being proposed that was brought forward by Councilmember Price that's being included in the second reading. This is the area of this language deals with the intent statement again. This is what staff had proposed originally, dealing with the suburban residential. This would be stricken from the motion to approve if adopted by the prior language. Some clarifying statements, just adding, dealing with car washes, removing multifamily from the RTH, RM conditionally, and then RM2 and RM3. And that is all of the text changes that staff went through on our list for first and second reading. I can go to Councilmember Eichelhardt's list if you wish me to right now.
This is a list for proposed amendments.
One of the lists.
I think we can summarize it. It's both. This is a long list, and I don't want to take the specific time to get to each detail. He can make that motion later, but if you can, and if Councilmember Eichelhardt wishes to add some more to what Brad has to say, I'll allow him to do that. Brad, you want to try to summarize Councilman Eichelhardt's changes?
Okay.
And you can put it up on the screen, but if you'll summarize those so the audience can understand the gist of it.
Councilman Eichelhardt's started with a infrastructure sufficiency request. We have some preliminary language that was placed at your dais this morning that was similar to Raleigh's. If you wish to redo that. One of the requests was to change the effective date. The ordinance drafted in front of you has the effective date of June 1st, 2014. A lot of the discussion on Saturday dealt with percentages of open space, building setbacks, coverage setbacks. It was determined, or at least a consensus at the work session on Saturday. Majority of these were not changed. We changed some of the percentages from 25 down to 20. There were some questions related to interior setbacks for principal buildings that council wanted to ask Code Studios about these. This is number 31 of the list. So we put the note on here, ask Lee. If the council still wants to do that, when the appropriate time, you can ask our consultant related to that. There was requests to change, deleting 7 stories and 8 stories. From that was not changed. A lot of it was also to include larger minimum lot sizes. Those changes were not included. There were changes that were done to the buffer setbacks that will be included in the buffer chart that we'll look at. So those were the majority of those changes. Then we got to a discussion on building mass to require that more than 30,000 square feet require conditional approval requirement for different locations for building mass. And that was the majority of the discussion on Councilmember Eichelhardt's spreadsheet for text amendment changes to the text.
Councilmember Eichelhardt, any corrections or additions to that? I know he didn't cover it in detail.
Oh, sure, no problem. Just one thing, though, I thought that we had all agreed throughout that the landscaped open space is 25%, it's the common open space is 20%. So, and on here, it actually only says a couple times that it's 20%. And actually now, you said it once or twice, but I only see it on line 109 really. But as I understand, that's the landscaped open space is 25 and it's the common open space is 20. But line 26 and 109 there, those are the two.
I think you're correct.
Okay, and that's all for now?
I think we're, through the document, landscape open space, where it is required, is to be 25%, and the common open space requirement was to be 20.
Correct. Great, thanks.
Okay. So,
Any other presentation on the text?
no.
All right, you mentioned the matrix.
Right.
What I'd like to do is cover all the presentation of the second reading before I go to a public hearing, including the map. Yes, Councilmember Nguyen.
Mr. Townsend, on 138, did we ever figure out the parking table yet? Or are we still looking at that? 138.
We didn't have a chance to get that information. I mean, you're asking the discussion as to townhouse requirement?
Right, correct. So we're still looking at...
We're still looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Diamond.
I think what I thought we were doing was going to reference what exactly we used to get to the number we got to, so that it showed, I think it was a national standard that we were using.
Right.
And we were just going to reference that, so whatever.
Well, because our current table doesn't have a townhouse category, we're also going to add that, and that's what we were going to check with RDOT as to what the minimum requirements, as well as there was some concern as to making sure we had sufficient number of guests in that type of development also. So we wanted to make sure that number was accurate, so we're still working on that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Price.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I was not at the work session Saturday, the notice was too short for me to be able to get there, and I understand that there was some discussion after the microphones were turned off, but there was not a quorum, so I suppose that's proper, but I don't know if any changes on these sheets reflect that subsequent discussion. But my specific question is on number 4, on page 4 of 6, in the pink section, where it does not say proposed second reading, what is the disposition of that item?
I don't think any direction was given to staff related to that item.
I think that one was not proposed for the second reading.
Right.
But it was.
So we're leaving it as it was?
Yes.
Yeah, well, what we did was, rather than change IL to add permitted uses, we changed the properties in question to IX,
X.
which was a better fit for.
Okay, so, but I mean, it's blank there. So the proposed second reading is to have it in IX, is that correct?
Well, that's more of a map change.
That's a map change instead of a text change.
We'll be getting to the map in a minute. We haven't covered the map provisions yet. The first round was covering the text provisions. I think you mentioned the matrix you want to cover, and I want to cover the map.
The specific question is, do we put a P in medical and office under IL? And we're not suggesting that for this reading.
Right.
Okay, I just don't want that to slip through the cracks because it doesn't have a resolution here, and, you know, there's a no in column 3. I want to make sure that that is going to be either medical offices will be permitted in that area, or it's clearly going to go to an IX, and I don't know that we have that under the map recommendations. So I want some consensus of council that we are going to allow medical office buildings on the south side of Hembry Road.
We'll be covering the map in a minute, and you can answer that question again if it's not answered in the presentation.
Can I just ask for a consensus of council whether they agree that medical offices should be allowed on the south side of Hembry Road?
I think the question is, are those properties going to be in IX? And I believe they're on our spreadsheet as IX, are they not?
Well, this is a spreadsheet, and it just doesn't have a disposition. That's,
Well, but the map spreadsheet, the
map
one that has the
spreadsheet.
properties
You'll
on it.
hold your question to the
Thank-
map. I think it'll,
thank you.
I'm going to put
time it would be better.
language in this location to indicate requires map change. So that will, on this spreadsheet, will indicate that it does need to be put on the map.
Thank you.
Any other
I just don't want it to
questions?
slip through the cracks. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the text? You may proceed with the presentation, Brad.
Oh, wonderful. This is the buffer table. The red indicates changes made at the work session, the removals of D and all, or C in all of the employment districts related to when any of the employment or commercial districts abut a residential district. They are required to have the 40-foot buffer in type D with the landscaping and no wall requirement. Also, type D is required for any external development for the historic district, as well as in a PRD, the buffer is determined by the existing development that it would be adjacent to, making more similar. If you have any questions.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Price, you're still studying. Do you need more time?
I've never seen this before, so I would like to reserve my opinion for the future, but first time I've seen this. Thank you.
Okay.
Again, we'll be hearing, you'll have the opportunity to bring it up again on the 24th. If you'll proceed with the map, I assume that's next.
That is next. The proposed height map, which I'm bringing up,
Do we have a?
as discussed on Saturday, the majority of the location for the height remains around the 400 Holcomb Bridge corridor. We have included the hospital at a 7-story, as well as the Mansell Overlook Office Park buildings that are currently built at 95 feet or plus. Then the 4 stories around the multifamily designation. The hotel is at 7 stories. Kimberly Clark at 7 stories. The vacant property, an OCMS at the southwest quadrant, or southeast quadrant at 7 stories, and 4 stories in the downtown districts. Everything else, other than what's indicated on the map, is 3 stories. And that should be reflected on the map that you have in front of you also.
Any more information to present before we open it up for a public hearing?
I have the complete map spreadsheet. I don't know if we really need to go over everything. The spreadsheet is broken down into the categories where, well, let me pull it up. This is the spreadsheet reviewed on Saturday, which provides approximately 2,800 pieces of property, the existing zoning, UDC zoning, what was approved on first reading. The ones that were left in question were then researched and discussed at the work session on Saturday, and that gives the second reading indication of what they're being proposed. I don't believe Councilmember Price's properties, what were the addresses of those properties, Councilmember Price?
Do you mean the ones on Hembry Road?
Yes.
I don't know the addresses.
Let me pull up a map and see if we can point them out.
I mean, it's basically any of the medical office buildings on, from Alpharetta Highway to whatever, Wills Road or beyond.
1305.
The blue is the section that is currently OP, which we felt would be consistent to put it back to an OP. I believe, Councilmember Price, you're talking about these lots here. Are those the ones?
No, I'm talking about the whole stretch of road. I think IX would be very appropriate for them. Doesn't allow everything that would be allowed in OP?
So you're asking to rezone the industrial designations that are currently industrial here.
That are light industrial, yes. I mean, I thought we were trying to get away from spot zoning, so if we replace these back to OP, we're going to have spot zoning for, you know, just a few little properties.
Well, that's what council's direction was, whatever was OP to make it OP. So I'm trying to clarify where the IX would go.
I thought we had that discussion that all that stretch would be, instead of IL, it'd be IX.
Well, let me zoom out a little bit.
Unless there's some usage in OP that's currently OP that's not allowed in IX, I think IX would be a reasonable transition to keep it cohesive but not restrictive.
So does the council have a pleasure as to how we determine what we zone IX?
Just to clarify the question, Hembry Road is the road that is running east-west.
Correct.
And it would run, what are the roads between?
Alpharetta Highway.
To?
This is Wills here.
And so Councilmember Price is suggesting those properties that front on the south side of Hembry Road be zoned IX. Is that my understanding? When you say all, you're talking about all the properties fronting on Hembry, on the south side of Hembry, be zoned IX?
I just said anything that's currently, the usage is of a medical office building, it would be more appropriate to have it IX than IL.
All right, but I'm first trying to identify which parcels are you talking about? Are we talking about all the parcels fronting on the south side of Hembry?
I can't tell you every single one. I mean, I know I have a few that I have a personal interest in, but I think we should go beyond my personal interest.
And we are doing that, but as far as the ones that you're concerned about, the ones that you've had identified as, if we include all the properties on the south side of Hembry that front on Hembry, are we including all the properties you're concerned about?
All the...
Mr. Mayor, can we pull up an aerial and perhaps find it that way?
On an area?
I'm trying to get it. So, Councilmember Price, I'm trying to identify.
1355, 1357. This looks completely vacant. 1325. It's like 1455 are all the addresses on the south side.
All right, and they're currently zoned OP.
No.
No, they're currently zoned.
Those are all in zoned industrial.
They're all zoned industrial, and there's some doctor's offices on that, in that corridor.
Right.
And IX would allow what uses?
Would allow the office and medical as a permitted use.
All right, and OP would not allow medical as a permitted use?
OP would. IL
would not.
Would not.
So Councilmember Price is proposing that it be zoned IX, not IL.
Correct.
Are there any uses that are, that
It's pretty compatible.
IX is compatible?
It's more compatible with OP.
Then
the
are there any
industrial.
uses out there, existing uses that IX would be inconsistent with, that we're aware of?
Not that we're aware of.
All right, so Councilmember Price is proposing IX instead of IL.
Correct.
All right, and does the council members have any thoughts on that? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the two smaller buildings on, yeah, the one you're pointing to and the one next to it are office. I'm not sure what this building that you're pointing to now, is that an office building as well?
That's FSA.
That's FSA.
Fulton Science Academy.
That's not it. No, it's farther down.
You know what that building is?
Yeah, I don't believe it's Fulton Science.
I think the two
They used to
smaller
be,
ones-
they used to have retails and sales in there years ago,
That's not David's place.
or wholesale sale.
This is an office building.
I would think those three buildings, the larger building and the two to the left of it, certainly would be more IX. The one that you're pointing to right now is very much a light industrial building.
Yeah,
No, and that building that he's pointing at right now, there are medical office buildings in it. There are medical offices in that.
Are there offices in there?
Yeah.
Also, if you go back the other way, there's a very light colored building, that white one that's very vertical. That one's also all medical offices. And it's,
We've got that in the commercial heavy.
We have that as OP.
No, we've got that as commercial.
well, originally it was, yeah, commercial heavy, but then I think somebody went through and made it all OP. So we just kind of need to know where we are.
Well, Councilmember Price, are you suggesting all of these properties be IX?
I believe that allows the most compatible usage and least restrictive use of those properties. And yes, I would propose anything that's an office building of sorts on that corridor be IX.
And currently, on this map, it is shown as,
This map that we got a month or so ago shows it as IL, but the current, I think, staff,
under the current reading, what is it shown as?
OP, some of them.
Some of them. This one is shown as commercial heavy.
Any discussion by other council members on this property? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that for the industrial buildings that have office uses, they should be IX. I think OP needs to go to OP because we're trying to stick with equivalent zoning to the extent possible. So I would support a change like that.
You're supporting Councilmember Price's change?
Not the way I understand it.
All right, well, we need to be, probably need to be property specific here because just so everybody understands where they are. Which parcels?
Well, the properties that are currently zoned OP, I would support a change to OP. The ones that are light industrial that have office in them, I think would be appropriate to make them IX, because it's still in industrial zoning.
Do we need to go
Just
back to
provides
your
some
other map
flexibility.
to identify that, Brad? So I can understand Councilmember DiPolito's position.
We can probably need to go back.
So the blue is OP.
The blue is currently zoned OP. We were proposing it
And
for
you're,
OP.
and Council DiPolito's suggesting they remain OP.
Correct.
And the green, which fronts on Hembry, you're suggesting IX. You're okay with IX.
Yes, because it's currently industrial, we'd be zoning it to industrial and.
All right, Councilmember
X
Price.
allows office.
And OP allows professional doctors and IX allows professional doctors.
Correct.
Councilmember Price, does that position address your concerns?
Well, yes, to some extent. I mean, I'm concerned about reinserting OP into this character map, because that includes all of the hospital. And I'm not sure, does that limit the hospital, since it otherwise would have been commercial heavy? So suddenly we're changing it back to OP. I don't know if they're aware of that.
Let's try to stick right now to the south side of Hembry Road. We can talk about the north side of Hembry next. But on the south side of Hembry, Councilmember DiPolito is suggesting the areas in blue remain OP. They're currently OP. And you suggested the areas in green become IX. He's saying that's okay. I'm trying to see whether y'all two differ.
Well, personally, I'd like to see as little of IL as possible, since it's very restrictive in use and allows adult business.
Well, we can talk about other parcels right now, but I'm specifically talking about the parcels south of Hembry Road, which are in green right now, which is, I understand, the code for IL. And Councilmember DiPolito is suggesting that they go to IX, and I understand that you're suggesting they go to IX. So on those parcels, you seem to be together. The parcels that are now in green would become a different color, whatever the color of IX is. Let's not go beyond those parcels. Let's stick to those parcels first to see if Councilmember DiPolito agrees that they should be IX and you agree to IX. Is there anyone else who thinks they should be something different?
But the question is which ones specifically, and how far?
Specifically, if you take all those parcels that are on the south side of Hembry that are now green, they would become IX.
That abut the road.
That abut the road.
All the way to where? Wills or to North Meadow Parkway?
Let's do this. Let's go address by address.
Councilmember Diamond, maybe you can clear something up. I
don't know that I'm going to clear it up, but I think we have the idea of what we're looking for here, and I think without us sitting here not knowing all the details of this, I think we need to come back. Regardless of what we decide here, we're going to go research all this and make sure that we're accurate in what we think we're seeing. But
right.
I don't know how much time we need to, if the intent is we want to make sure, which I think we were pretty clear on, we want to make sure that the light industrial that's presently using it for office has that opportunity. And then we can come back and give you recommendations, because there's things that front Hembry and then there's things behind them, and I'm just not comfortable sitting here saying, and I think that's
in your motion, what are you anticipating your motion will be tonight on the map? Any changes from the map, or are you accepting any of these changes suggested by Councilmember DiPolito and Councilmember Price?
I will throw them out as a second reading with pending research on it, because I'm not ready to
All right, well, we'll
pick parcels here at the table.
Let you think about how you're going to formulate your motion. I think we've had a lot of discussion on this. We understand the issues.
I think I'm clear on the problem.
Councilmember Price, other matters you wish to raise?
I mean, I'd just like to see some clarity that we're not going down to the final wire to decide what happens to these. I want to know what's going to be in the final proposed wording.
There will be a motion tonight. That motion will not be voted on for 2 weeks. I'm not sure we'll have the final wording on anything right now, but we'll have at least something for the citizens to consider. It may not make all council members happy, but the citizens will know where this council is what the motion's going to be that we're going to be voting on, and we'll entertain that motion after we hear from the public. Other questions from council before we open it up for public questions and comments? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Just one question on the things that all say Ask Lee and all the things we're unsure of. Are we doing that later, or?
There will be a motion tonight and a second. And I understand there will be a request to defer that motion in a second, so there'll be further discussion of the motion in a second before we take a vote on it in 2 weeks. But there'll be a specific motion and a second, and then.
Right, but that's not relevant to my question, I don't think.
I apologize. I'm not very good at understanding questions.
There are pieces throughout that says Ask Lee or may have some other clarification. Are we going to do that later? Are we going to do that?
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have public comment next. And then I'm going to, well, first, and then I'm going to entertain a motion, which I understand is going to be part of that motion will be to have it voted on in 2 weeks. And then we'll have a full discussion by council. Questions, comments, you can propose amendments at this time. You can wait till later to propose amendments.
I don't actually have any amendments. I guess it's the points of things that we aren't clear about when we're going to become clear. And Nancy has her hand up.
Nancy.
Can I propose that maybe we have the Ask Lee questions as part of our presentation so we can have all that information going into the motion? Because there's
when
not
you
a
say
lot
questions,
of them. There's just a few things on the proposed motion where there's clarification from our consultant who's here with us tonight. So that might be helpful before
why don't we
comments,
hear those clarifications before we have the public hearing?
Thank you. I do have one other comment. It's my turn. I have one other comment on in NX, multifamily is conditional as it is everywhere. We need to address the Roswell Housing Authority property, and I just want to have on the record that that is something that we will have a resolution to, if not tonight, before that final vote, because they now by right have that ability, and they're the only ones that do, and we need to make sure that we've worded it in such a way to make sure that's covered. And we are working on that, so I don't want that to look like it's not being covered in here.
All right, did you have some questions for our consultant?
Yeah, I think Brad has the list there. We can run through the Ask Lee questions.
One above that.
Actually, the first one I see, yeah. One.
So this first Ask Lee question, for the record, I'm Lee. Lee Einsweiler with Code Studio from Austin, Texas. The first Ask Lee question is in regard to attached house, which is a side-by-side duplex, and the setting of the side yard to 10 feet. I'd be reluctant to do that for one simple reason. As it stands, you have a 50-foot wide lot allowed in that district for this building type. If you have two 10-foot side yards, I have a 30-foot wide building. If I split it into a duplex, each side of the duplex is 15 feet. You didn't allow me to have townhouses that narrow. I don't think you meant me to have duplexes that had 15-foot sides on them. So your choices are widen the lot so that the building makes sense at about 20 feet wide, which would mean if you want the 10-foot side yards, you need at least a 60-foot wide lot, or leave the side yards as they are, and it will currently generate a reasonable sized attached unit. So I offer that up for your consideration later. The next one was a limit on the maximum units per acre when abutting specific districts. I haven't actually seen this concept ever used anywhere. The intent of zoning typically is that rules within a district are consistent within a district. If you need another district, apply another district in between. So in other words, map that transition if you feel the need to map that transition. But asking a transition to occur within a district in which everybody else has allocated a package of rights that you don't achieve seems to be a bit challenging to me. So I would recommend not to use this transitional model and to figure out an alternative way to transition this. There's a series on the back page, right? Yes. There are a series of questions which I believe are all for the downtown district. Is that correct? Yes. 5. Recommending that the downtown district maximum building size be shrunk to 20,000 square feet from 30. This is the maximum building size by right before a conditional use permit would be required. As I recall, we borrowed this idea from Groveway. That was the original idea, was that, oh my gosh, if we're going to have big buildings, we'd better look at them with more review horsepower than at the staff level only, and have a public conversation about them, and therefore the conditional use permit process. It's completely appropriate to consider where that line falls. I think what you want to think about here is the kinds of things that you might want to encourage in this district. For example, if you're trying to encourage grocery store or other kinds of things that might have larger footprints, you ought to be a little bit cautious about where that line is set. But this is, for the most part, a policy question for you to gauge yourselves. In thinking about that, a typical modern corner drugstore is on the order of 12 or 15,000 square feet. So you're talking about a space that would be the equivalent of 2 of those stuck together at that 30,000 foot level. If you wanted to change that, that's worth considering. I think if ever there were an area where you can probably manage some larger footprints, it's in the downtown area, and certainly there are other portions of the city where large footprints would be acceptable as well. But this is an area where larger footprints might be appropriate. You have lots of kinds of additional layers of authority here. You have potentially the historic district lying over the top of these that helps you with infill development. You have your new design guidelines that will be available, so that if you truly wanted to break up the mass of a large building and make it look like smaller buildings, you could use the design guidelines to do that. So in the end, I'm not terribly concerned about where this number falls, and in fact, I might be willing to eliminate the number completely and not have the conditional use obligation. This is, again, an open policy question for you. That's as much background as I can probably offer.
Member DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lee, I would say your last name, but I can never get it right.
Einsweiler.
Mr. Einsweiler. I believe this issue is in the Groveway district as a use, but not as a building mass itself. So
as a tenant space.
Yeah,
yes.
I think we're kind of mixing apples and oranges here, where 30,000 was meant to control tenant size. So we didn't get larger boxes, and we had 30,000 feet because we could accommodate a specialty grocery store, but it wouldn't be too large of a grocery store. So the part of the discussion the other day was, do we need to have a building mass at all? To your point, some of these areas may have larger building footprints, but a lot of that is controlled through the design guidelines, where you can't have continuous line of building, you have to break it up and so forth. So I think you were kind of hinting at, we may drop this all together. Is there a way to insert use in
Well, so
here
the
instead.
tenant space question is a very different one. And frankly, if you'd have to really believe that you're going to get only the right things if you get only small spaces. And that's true at much smaller slices. So for example, in Palm Beach, the maximum size for a tenant space is 2,000 square feet. And when the Gap asked to open 2 stores next to each other and connect a door in between, they lost a court case in trying to set up that 4,000 square foot space. So clearly we can do those kinds of things if we're really looking for a very specific scale of tenant. At 20 or 30,000 feet, and especially if that's just the tenant space and I can then have adjacent tenant spaces, which is what Groveway would have allowed, we didn't feel that was doing anything for you. So we turned it into the building footprint, thinking that what you were more concerned about was bulk and mass, rather than this other question, which is a little bit more about tenanting. Yes, it makes sense to set tenant spaces. If you're going to set them, you would set them for places like Canton Street, the sort of precious spaces, and you would set them substantially smaller than what we're looking at here. Otherwise, I don't think I would be tempted to set the tenant space mark. And if the bulk and mass is managed by both existing parcel sizes and the processes that they'll have to go through in the future, then you don't need these numbers, as you noted.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Diamond, anything further from Lee that you can think of at this time? You're not excused. We still may need you. Any further comments from council before I open it up to the floor? At this time, if you're in the audience, you have any questions or comments, we'll hear from you. So if you've got any, yes, sir, come forward. If you'll give us your name and address, we do have a 5-minute time limit.
Fairwood, Council, Lee Fleck, Martin's Landing. Is this overhead on?
We can get it on.
Please, would you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The one item that I wish to talk to this evening, and I feel very strongly about, is the first recommendation, Councilman Eigelhart, and that is the infrastructure sufficiency clause to be added, recommended to be added to the UDC. I feel so strongly about it, I'm going to read the general statement of what an infrastructure sufficiency requirement is, which is taken, those who can see it, from the City of Roswell, or City of Raleigh's Unified Development Ordinance Code, whatever you want to call about it. I think this is a very prudent clause that they've included, and I don't see why it would be of such objection to be put into your code. Infrastructure sufficiency in general is to lessen congestion in the streets and to facilitate the efficient and adequate provisions of transportation, water, and sewer, and to secure safety for fire. Every subdivision plan and site plan shall be subject to a determination of the sufficiency of the infrastructure. And it goes on to say the infrastructure shall be considered sufficient where it is demonstrated to have available capacity to accommodate the demands generated by the proposed development, as well as other approved developments and master plans. In order to avoid undue hardship, the applicant may propose to construct or secure sufficient funding for the facilities necessary to provide capacity to accommodate the proposed development at the adopted level of service. The commitment for construction or advancement of necessary facilities shall be included as a condition of the development. I think that is a very prudent portion that should be considered strongly. And so I wholeheartedly support Councilman Eaglehart's initial proposed out of this list. Other than that, personally, I think that the cottage houses are a very bad plan no matter where they're going to be. Since I have so much time left over, I really think, I know you've done a lot of work on this and everything, and the one thing that still concerns me is that, that what we're talking about here is big government, higher densities, traffic congestion, crime, the negative impact on schools, and this is all going to be an integral part of this UDC. My major concerns is what type of public safety input has been provided by either Chief Grant or Chief Spencer, because I'm sorry if you haven't breached these subjects in all good conscience. How in the hell can you even consider something this dramatic? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Davidson, have you had the opportunity to review the language which Mr. Leafleck read?
Not exactly, well, part of that language, yes. And while I agree with part of what he said, we do have developmental impact fees already in place in the city of Roswell, which would force the developer to pay for the portion of improvements that his project would cause, not system improvements, but the stuff that would be for his project. The other issues such as traffic, the Georgia Supreme Court has said you can't base a rezoning decision solely on traffic. There's other areas where obviously we can base decisions, and traffic can be considered, but traffic alone or roads are not the only thing that you can base it on. So yes, I've reviewed the language. I don't disagree with what he is proposing. It's just that we have things in place already, and because we do have the developmental impact fees in place already, if we try to get more from a developer, then that would be an extraction, and that's not legal.
Do you have concern about the how the constitutionality of our ordinance if we include the language as Mr. Fleck read it? Have you advised council on that?
Yes, I believe that it would be unconstitutional to do it the way that he just read.
And is that because there's a difference in Georgia law and North Carolina law?
Absolutely, yes.
All right, so you've advised council against that specific language? That
specific language. You can consider what infrastructure is available, but requiring them to build infrastructure that would be a system improvement, you cannot do.
Thank you, sir. Who'd like to speak? Yes, next. Come forward, please.
Good evening. My name is Linnell Winnicky. I'm a resident of Roswell, 211 Quail Run, which is a townhome community within Martin's Landing. I am chair of the Martin's Landing Community Development Committee, and I've been asked by the board to read a letter from them regarding their concerns into the record. Mayor and council members, as the UDC proposal moves forward, the board of Martin's Landing would like to share their continuing concerns regarding this important piece of legislation. We appreciate your encouragement of community input on this complex issue. While the necessity of an update to the current zoning regulations is well understood and recognized as a positive move forward, There continue to be elements in the proposed ordinance that are of serious concern to the neighborhoods of Martin's Landing, as set forth below, and we request your consideration as follows. We recommend that 7 stories should be the maximum height for structures with no bonus or additional stories included in any character area. These building heights are already far in excess of MLF community preferences. We specifically ask you to look at the corridors and node districts section, originally on pages 4 through 6, but given with the revisions, it may be different pages, and the employment districts, pages 4 through 6. The MLF board also continues to have deep concern over the number of parcels with conditional allowance for apartments, especially within the MLF school attendance zones. We request that a mix of uses be a requirement for any rezonings to mixed-use categories on parcels 10 acres in size or larger. Although specific ratios would be difficult to prescribe, a minimum of 2 uses, mixed either vertically or horizontally within a proposed site of this size, should be required to meet the intent of mixed-use walkable projects. We request that the intent section of the 2030 Comprehensive Plan regarding the Southeast Quadrant area be included in the review of any rezoning requests in the area for compliance. We request that the UDC include a statement, for example, city approval of a rezoning or conditional use request does not relieve a property owner of their responsibility to meet the requirements of all applicable neighborhood covenants and secure the approval of their neighborhood HOA in the appropriate article, so that an individual resident within the MLF community or any homeowners association is clearly aware of the need for review of compliance with MLF covenants or their appropriate association covenants. Request that the approved MLF site plan be carried over to the UDC with corrections as noted in prior notifications through your discussions. Request that there be a clarification of stub street to define public versus private and elimination of the requirement of a new subdivision to provide a vehicular connection to privately owned stub streets. The Board of Martin's Landing would again like to thank the Mayor and Council for their outreach and openness to input from the community as it moves forward with its attempts to update and simplify our zoning ordinance. And this is presented by the Martin's Landing Board. Thank you.
My name's Robert Greist. I'm with Smith, Gambrell, and Russell, 1230 Peachtree Street. I'm here on behalf of MetLife, my client, and have a question on clarification for a prior rezone in terms of conditions. In 2009, there was a rezone of our property in Mansell Overlook where we are proposing to do a development, and as a condition of that 2009 rezone to OCMS, we must develop in terms or in substantial accordance with the site plan. My question is, and my client's question is, that there is a 4,000 square foot retail center which is on that site plan, and this area being considered to be zoned as office park, retail is very limited in OP. And our question is whether we can obviously build this in accordance with the site plan, but will we be able to carry over the uses that were available under OCMS, or basically be effectively prevented from building the 4,000 square retail foot as it is on the site plan?
Is my understanding that council brought uses forward. So any one use that was allowed at the time would be maintained, as well as any use that was prohibited would still be prohibited. That would be my understanding.
Mr. Davidson, do you wish to add to that?
Yes, I think that was a condition of that rezoning, so those conditions would come forward. I think their question is, it says retail on the site plan, and they don't know exactly what's allowed in retail. And I spoke with Brad earlier today, and we allow retail, so it would be anything that could fit in the 4,000 square foot building that is retail, so.
Have we clarified anything for you?
Yeah, but in Office Park, I mean, retail, you have to have multiple tenants. It can't be a standalone building. So you're talking about a 4,000 square foot building where you'd have to have multiple tenants. There's also, I mean, the restrictions on retail are just so strict. You can't have a restaurant. I mean, there's, a lot of stuff in OP. It's basically, unless you have it as an accessory use in a larger building such as the office buildings in Mansell Overlook. I mean, there's really nothing that our client would be able to do with 4,000 square feet if it does build that building in accordance with the site plan.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Do we have a copy of the site plan in question? Did you bring a copy with you? Can you put it on the overhead so we can look at it real quick? Because that parcel, we actually, I think, zoned the corner and the existing retail. We're actually making it CX, which gives you even more flexibility. So which is the parcel you?
The parcel in question is right here. And I believe under the map that this, which is existing, or this is CX, we're asking about.
Brad, you want to pull up the map so we can confirm what the proposed zoning map would be, the proposed map would be?
Yeah, we attempted to give you CX where you had retail slated.
So where's the parcel on this?
Let me pull up this. This parcel here.
It's the parcel
It's
in
actually,
red?
it's the one directly to the right of that red.
And so it's in blue?
Correct. It's OP7.
Mr. Townsend, I think the intent was to pick up that whole corner, which would be those two buildings.
So Rich, are you suggesting that their property be picked up in red?
Yes, the two buildings, because it looks like, it's hard to judge from this specific map that we might actually be
Looks like
splitting
we only
that.
picked up the first one.
You want to get you want to get an aerial of this?
Well, it's vacant land, so the aerial
Oh,
probably.
it's not going to tell us.
It's not going to show.
The site plan's a little
right.
better
So,
measure
but
that.
but
The intention was to pick up those two, that whole corner, which is
to
those
include
two
the
buildings
parcel
as
he's talking
CX.
about, it would be to zone it what?
CX.
CX. Are you familiar with what CX allows?
It's commercial mixed
Yes.
use, which is.
Would CX be acceptable to your client?
Yeah, I believe that would cover it all.
So it's this vacant parcel as well
I
as
will-
this vacant parcel.
I will
Correct.
encourage Nancy and
I'd like to have addresses.
Betty to consider that.
I'd like to have addresses if I could.
If you'll give us the address on this parcel that you're concerned about.
It's vacant, so I don't think it has.
Yeah, it doesn't have a street address.
I'll give you a PIN number if I can.
PIN number, that would be a parcel identification number.
Two 600560031. 31.
Is that where you're pointing to right now? Put your cursor on the 081.
Yeah, that's the two parcels.
Well, one of them's already included.
So he's
We'd have to
asking-
add 81.
So we're asking A1 to be included. Correct.
Is that consistent with what your client would wish?
Yes, I believe so.
I think you've made your point.
All right.
Thank you for coming tonight. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please. Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate your input.
Hello, good evening.
My name is Jennifer Harding. I'm on the Board of Directors for Ivy Mills neighborhood. And I'm here to represent our homeowners of Ivy Mills to express our concern and opposition to the potential rezoning of Chafin Road. Our understanding is that the City of Roswell has a 2030 master plan which requires any new development to be compatible with the adjacent existing character with similar densities and lot sizes. The potential rezoning of Chafin Road would not
Before
meet...
we go forward, if we can pull up the map and see what the map change is going to be to make sure we're all on board. I understand.
The Chafin Road between Hardscrabble and Crabapple.
So what is the map the proposed map going to zone this property as? But I know it's under that general category, but.
The gray in this area is the civic locations.
Okay, and that would be the school and church.
Lebanon Baptist Church.
All right. And I'm trying to get which property are we talking about that you're concerned about this map?
So Ivy Mills is right, is that us right there?
Yep.
So the area directly across Chafin Road.
And Chafin, and the map is proposing that to be what category?
RS30 as it currently exists.
So this map is not
no-
proposing any change.
But she's talking about the potential for it to happen.
I understand you're opposed to something of a potential, but as far as this map.
Okay.
And what this, I'm assuming the motion is going to be is not to make a change tonight.
Okay.
Or any time without an application and more hearings and planning commissions and the whole shooting match. So right now, there's no proposed change.
That sounds great.
Can we allow her to finish reading her letter, though?
Anything you'd like to add to that? Thank you.
Okay. Did you have a question?
If the council has any comments,
Oh, sorry.
we'll hear from them when it's time for the council comment.
But specific to this, may I ask her a question?
Certainly, you may ask a question.
So are you concerned about the zoning category or a change in use or a change in types of buildings that could be there?
Moreover, right now, the way Chafin Road exists, it's large lot sizes, less housing, and we enjoy that. We enjoy the green space. We enjoy the large lots. So just any change in that, we would be opposed to.
So just to clarify that, could staff answer if there's anything in an RS30 that wasn't in RS30 previously that would now be allowed there?
Uses.
Uses or types of structure?
Not in the RS30, no.
So RS30 is identical.
But their concern, that's been stated numerous times, is not about that specific rezoning. It's about what could be allowed. And the intent statement allows RS4, 6, and CC to continue in the suburban residential.
I think that's an opportunity for council to make an argument, but as far as her question.
You cut off her comment based on that.
Any more comments you'd like to make?
I would just suggest you finish reading the letter.
Well, I was trying to respond to the question. The question was, is the current map is not making a change?
If the current map is not, if we're not proposing a change, I mean, right now we live on a very quiet suburban street that we very much value and enjoy, that we'd like to see stay the same.
And the current zoning is, the lot size is not going to change from the existing to the proposed. Lot size is not changing.
Okay, and density is not changing.
The density, if you're talking about lot size, the lot size, the number of units per, on that lot is not changed.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the floor? Yes, sir, come forward.
It's Eric Schumacher, 145 Prospect Street. I want to thank the council and the mayor for allowing me to sit in on and participate in some of the conversations and a lot of the work sessions in the UDC for the last few weeks. I really appreciate it. It was a great insight into how things work and maybe sometimes not work so well. So I'd like to comment on residential cottage court. I'm very concerned about us creating what is essentially an RS 1.2 lot size with no ingress egress requirements. This is a large concern because the site also does not require any frontage itself, which could potentially allow somebody to stack a number of sites together to create a lot of landlocked lots that are 1,200 square feet each, which could present a fire problem, safety problem, legal problem, and certainly it creates a very, very high density when we have 1,200 square foot lots. Because you can horizontally mix cottage court with other types, consider that you could potentially be seeing requests for putting cottage court buildings on existing properties that currently have townhouses. So for instance, if a current townhouse development has large buffers and those buffers are going away under the UDC, for instance, cottage courts could be placed in those locations because you can mix. There's no guarantee that any of the cottage court courtyards are actually abutting any of the cottages as well. So potentially a company could say that the existing parkland inside of a townhouse development is the allotted cottage court square footage. So I'm concerned about horizontally mixing. I'm concerned about ingress egress frontage problems. The fact that we don't have frontage requirements for our sites. We don't have any language around how many sites go together. I'm also concerned that we have an intent for cottage courts that should be surrounding a courtyard, but that's an intent. It doesn't sound like it's a legal requirement or a rule requirement rather than an intent. And I'm concerned that if somebody comes to council or comes to staff and makes a request for a variance to have a long string of cottages with some green strips for our courtyard, that might be passed without much concern or by staff. I'm not really sure. I would like David to address the intent wording in the UDC itself and whether intent really is a requirement or do we actually need to put stronger language in a lot of our categories to ensure there are actual requirements for our building types so that we really meet the intent that we think we're going to see. I'm concerned about accessory buildings not having a square footage maximum. Okay? We have a square footage maximum today. That maximum is the size or smaller than the primary building on the lot. Because we're getting rid of accessory building maximums and our setbacks are much smaller and you can build outside the building envelope, we could potentially be seeing accessory buildings that are being built in those setbacks much larger than the primary building. So I think that we should add back a maximum on accessory building size. Districts are not defined in the document itself, but there is much talk about districts, especially when it comes to boundaries on the maps. Page 1.4 talks about interpretation of boundaries for districts, but we need to see these districts on the maps to understand where these building types and zoning types will come up. How can anybody in Roswell know what's going to happen in their neighborhood if you don't tell them what your intent is for those district boundaries and how that fits the comprehensive plan? You know, somebody may come up and say there are really 4 RS4, RS6 lots because they own a big piece of land. I think they're crazy to think about RS4 and RS6 when we've got residential cottage court. So please think about residential cottage court if you're really going to maximize your density and make something that the rest of Roswell isn't interested in. Further, I would say that I'm glad there are documents in the back, but realistically, the public cannot understand everything you've presented to have an official second reading on this document. It's impossible to understand. And I say that because I've been at all the meetings. I know what you've talked about, but it's impossible to know what is in the UDC based on a first reading document, multiple spreadsheets with short wording and references. It's impossible and unrealistic. Thank you.
Mr. Davidson, would you respond to the question regarding intent statements? You may have a seat.
The intent statement is just that. They can be changed by the mayor and council. It's just the intent. It doesn't obligate the council to anything. It could be used, obviously, in court by somebody that's unhappy with the decision of mayor and council. But again, it's not an obligation of council to, so.
You may sit down.
Could I ask a question specifically about cottage court and the definition with the intent?
One more question.
In the intent statement.
And then you may sit down.
Thank you. I appreciate it. With the intent statement with cottage court, for instance, the intent is that the cottages are surrounding the courtyard, but there isn't any language in the rule for the cottage court as a building type to ensure that that actually happens. Does the intent in that section actually require somebody to build surrounding a courtyard, or is it just a suggestion? Rather, we rely on the wording of the building type in the different zones.
You may have a seat.
Thank you.
Lee, can you respond to that question?
I think it depends on what your definition of intent is. So the building types have definitions associated with them. If we look at one of those, can you just go up to the building type itself? See if you can find it. So look at the opening statement there. So I guess this is a description because each building type is described below. So could the language about this be tightened up in the interest of ensuring clarity? Yes, certainly. That language is intended to be a definition of the building type, and as such would set parameters for the building type, but the page itself could also set similar parameters if we wanted to add them.
Thank you, sir. Other questions or comments from the floor? Yes, come forward, please.
Hello, everyone. Long time no see. I'm Lisa DeCarbo. I live at 130 South Shore Court, and I'm a member of the Planning Commission. I had forwarded to staff today a list of questions that I had actually forwarded but had apparently email trouble with Thursday evening that I was hoping to have addressed in the Saturday work session, and I don't know if you all have seen those. And I'm guessing no. Okay. I don't know if we want to go through these here. I have 3 pages. There's no way in 5 minutes I can do it.
You have 5 minutes.
I have 5 minutes. Okay. Let me hit the main ones then, and would hope that at some point these are addressed. One of the main things that I had brought up, and I don't see in the language of the document yet, is we have been saying for quite some months that for existing apartments, RM2 and RM3 zonings, whenever there's going to be an increase in the number of units, it will be a conditional use. I don't see that actually written in the document anywhere, and I think that's really key. It's something that we've been telling everyone for quite some time. One of the others that I wonder about, we've talked several times about bringing over all the site plans and all the conditions from the past. But if we're looking at the item page 4 of 6, number 13 in the blue, it still says adding Appendix A shall include approvals of rezoning and conditional uses from January 1st, 2000 to the effective date of the UDC. Also includes any lawsuit and targeted properties in protected districts. I thought in work session we were going to take that back to certain conditions for conditional uses and a variety of other things, all the way back to the beginning of the process. And I just wondered if that language is actually going to be available for us to review. I agree that there should be some way to address the sufficiency of the traffic infrastructure. Let me see what my top ones are here. One of the other things that I had as a key item was a transition from the corridor no districts to the residential. And I think Lee brought up one of the ways that we could handle that, which would be at some point maybe create another transitional district between some of those corridors and the suburban residential. And I also see the problems in doing that, because in a lot of those places we only have one parcel depth between serious suburban residential with fairly low densities and the commercial corridors, Highway 9 and Holcomb Bridge. But I think it's something that we should consider, and I can imagine, if anything, that might be where townhomes and cottage courts and such would be appropriate as well. There was one section where I found some conflicts between the build-to zone at corners and pedestrian access in the forecourts. If you look at page 2.7, it says a facade must be within the first 30 feet of the build-to zone facing each street. That contradicts one of the things that we had in the Groveway plan, which was that there could be a special treatment at the corners so that you could provide something that was rounded, angled, what have you. So that instead of having the entire corner all the way come all the way out there, you could do something on a significant corner that would be much more architecturally pleasing. So we may want to take a look at that. One of the other things that was listed was on page 2-14, the forecourts. The maximum width and depth should be weighed against each other. Right now it says the maximum depth is 35 feet, maximum width is 35. Now I don't know if we want to avoid, or if this is something that could be left to design review board, but I don't think we would envision having something that's 35 feet long and say 6 or 8 feet wide. I don't think that's necessarily what we're looking for. So there might be something there or in the design guidelines that would address that. The other thing is, again, can a forecourt happen within that first 30 feet of the corner of a building? There might be places where we want to do that a little closer for having outdoor dining, what have you. So there might be something that we have to give in terms of following the BTZ right there. Sorry, some of these terms are probably not going to make sense to everyone else here. Let me see some of the other highlights. In the 2.15, 2-15, page 2-15, we have the various garage layouts for detached homes. I noticed number 4 is one that is really not meeting the design intent, I think, for a lot of the structures here. It's one where you have the garage directly in front of the house, basically blocking the entire facade. And I just wondered if it might be appropriate to put in there that this is something that is not a preferred, a discouraged out possibility. Other things in there, we don't have any that are befitting some of the existing conditions where you actually have the garage not detached but attached on the back of the house. I think that's fairly common actually around town.
To wrap up, I'm sure that the council will review these comments in email, but any last closing words?
3 parcels that still need to be looked at, and I will get those. Well, I already have those to Brad, but I can send a copy to all of you as well. Thank you for the time, and thank you for your diligence, and I hope you do consider these last few things.
Thank you. There were a lot of things to consider. There were a few questions. Council, Ms. Love, was your comment? Nancy has her hand up.
I want to apologize. I misunderstood, Lisa, the way we had left that. I know you came in with that printed sheet on Saturday and we weren't able to get to it by the end, but I thought at the end we had talked about that a lot of those had been covered in the work session and that you were going to kind of knock off the ones that we'd already covered and send it back in Excel form so that we could add those together. So I'm sorry if I didn't read that correctly, but we will absolutely go through whatever you say.
Can I respond real quick? I did knock most of them off. There are only a few that I left on here were things where we hadn't actually seen the text that had been discussed.
Sure.
But I wanted to
And
prove
this-
that for the most part, these are probably 95% things we didn't discuss.
Great, okay, thank you.
Councilmember Price.
Mr. Carbo, if I may ask you a question.
Come back to the microphone, please.
Are you speaking as an individual, or are you speaking from the Planning Commission, or has the Planning Commission given any disposition on the UDC as a whole?
No, we have not. I'm guessing that we're going to be addressing that this month. And I'm sure we will have a few more questions and comments in that too. But these are my review comments as a citizen and as a member of the Planning Commission, yes.
Okay, but as far as Planning Commission goes...
I'm not speaking for the Planning Commission.
Right,
I'm only looking at this through my duty of review.
But do you feel like the Planning Commission has come to any unanimity of recommendation or thought on this?
I couldn't speak for everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you. You did raise a couple of questions I think we can respond to. The questions regarding past conditions, could we get a summary of what the proposal is regarding past zoning conditions of where we stand today? Who would be Brad, are you the right person to answer that question?
This is the wording that was discussed at the work session. Appendix A shall include approvals of rezonings and conditional uses from January 1, 2000 to the effective date of the UDC. Also included any lawsuits, target properties, and protected districts. When a property abuts a protected district, the site plan shall be reviewed and approved by Mayor and City Council. Items controlled by conditions of approval, such as days of operation, buffers, limitations of uses, noise levels, shall be enforceable. That is the current proposed language.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Davidson, there was a suggestion that we include more language regarding sufficiency of traffic. Would you address that?
The sufficiency of traffic, as I said earlier, it's fine to consider, but it can't be the only thing you would base a decision on. So, you know, if it's a condition that's already on a property, I think it's fine to bring it forward.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments? I see no hands up. Come forward, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Nydia Tisdale. I live in Brookfield Country Club, and I'd like to thank the members who came and addressed our Homeowners Association yesterday afternoon concerning the UDC. Thank you for your time. I was at the work session on Saturday all day. It lasted from 11 a.m. to close to 5:30 p.m. And yes, a quorum was lost towards the end of the day as members had to leave, and the tape recording was turned off, and I was also asked to cease my video recording at that time. The video that I was able to capture is available on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Nydia. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Public hearing is closed. You'll have another opportunity to speak at the public hearing on the 24th. And you'll also, we do encourage you to contact council members and staff with your questions and comments, and we'll try to respond to those. Councilmember Diamond.
Yes, sir. There were two other documents that we didn't talk about. One was section 11.5, infrastructure sufficiency. There was a couple of items suggested to be added there. It's the one with A through D on your sheet. And the last two lines are red. If we can kind of run through that, and also the 1.3.2 use and enforcement of design guidelines, if you'll just kind of go over that, we can make sure we have everything on the record. Brad, do you want to let us, or is that a legal review? I'm not sure who wrote it.
Trying not to get up on this. Basically, this is language that was drafted in an attempt to come up with something that would give some comfort level for infrastructure sufficiency and also be in accordance with the state impact fee regulations. The difference with the city of Raleigh is that apparently if you look at their language, they don't have impact fees, they don't have the restrictions that the state of Georgia has, so we put this in an attempt to give a comfort level that infrastructure would be looked at when a project comes forward, which it currently is. But
and then the use of enforcement of design guidelines, is that proposed to be added as well?
It doesn't want to open. Just put it on the overhead.
this language is very similar to language that's in the current zoning regulations. Currently, the city of Roswell has multiple design guidelines, which we basically enforce from the standpoint of when a project goes through review, in particular when a project is reviewed by the Design Review Board or the Historic Preservation Commission. And at that time is when the design guidelines become standards and become enforceable because they are made as conditions of the project. Again, this is an attempt to give everyone a comfort level that the design guidelines will be looked at and they will be enforceable through the normal process of review and approval.
Thank you.
This is what I would like to do.
It may still need some legal massaging,
Right.
but this is the basic language from staff.
As I understand it, there is a desire to make a motion and then to defer the vote after another public hearing until the next regular council meeting, but to have a definite motion for folks to consider and then post that on our website so folks could review the details. Do we have a motion?
Yes. First, I'd like to number these in a way that we can kind of get an order, try to have some consistency to it. Our original sheet called second reading draft, I'd like to call that UDC 1. The item marked Eigelhart proposed UDC changes, I'd like UDC 2. Sorry, I should have done this sooner. I just thought about it. The Roswell buffer table would be UDC 3. Our map spreadsheet, UDC 4. Our height map, which we didn't talk about, but basically puts everything back where it was before the UDC, would be UDC 5. Our infrastructure sufficiency additions would be 6. And the enforcement of design guidelines would be 7. So I would like to make a motion. Let me see. I move to approve the ordinance to create the Unified Development Code and map with the following changes. Items 1 through 7, with the notations of on UDC 2, lines 121 through 124 be eliminated. Like to include the overlook parcel 12-226-005-59081 as CX. And I'm going to say review for the intent, for the conversation that we had about moving IX on Hembry from IL to IX in those parcels. We'll bring forward something for review, but hopefully you got the intent of where we were headed on that. The adoption date of this would be June 1st, or the adoption of the design guidelines, whichever is later. And I've got a few comments after that, but, and then I would like to...
Is that the effective date you're talking about? The
Yes.
adoption date would be the date approved. The effective date is when it goes into effect.
Right, the effective date would be...
June 1st.
Yes. And then to defer this vote on this motion until February 24th in order to give full review for all text and map amendments in accordance with this motion.
Right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, now the vote is going to be not on the motion because there's a request to defer.
Right.
The vote is going to be on the deferral part. And so we're going to be voting on whether to defer this vote until the 24th. Councilmember Orleans.
Councilwoman Diamond, on your inclusion of UDC number 1.
I missed your paragraph, I'm sorry.
Does that include what was it? What was
Yes.
shown tonight on
Yes.
screen versus what we have in our packets with the different wording?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, as we adjusted it.
Thank you.
All right. We're voting on deferral. Councilmember Eichelhardt.
2 questions I meant to ask when we were on the map. Does this big spreadsheet have the ones that I additionally asked about and we went through?
I don't think it includes the 2 Grace Hill and Glen Eves that you discussed on Saturday.
And frankly, I don't remember everyone, but whatever we went through that was
I think the
additional.
other ones that were down on 120 were covered.
Councilmember Diamond really needs to respond to this.
Well, I think some of that was after the quorum, so we didn't have a consensus, but we can absolutely pull that forward.
And the second question was, when do we think we will actually get a written version of all the things that we have here so that we will be able to review it?
At 6 o'clock.
And do we intend to have another work session before this final vote if there, because as we saw tonight, there were at least 2 things that we didn't get exactly right even from Saturday. So.
If it's the pleasure of council, we'll have another work session. Or
But that first
not
part is
pleasure,
is the big
but
question.
We can certainly have another work session. Lee, you seem to want to add to this.
Well, let me share for everybody's edification. There is no possible way that a clean draft with the level of annotation and change can be prepared for the 24th. So you
need another day.
You will be bringing forward the prior draft and a summary of changes as you have been in the past.
So are you looking for a clean one or just a summary of changes?
I think we'll try to flesh out the summary a little more so that people can follow it a little more, because there's a lot of things that are similar in a bunch of different places. But no, there won't be a totally clean.
But there will be a complete version if you read the original and the changes.
Yes. It
And
will
when
all be on there.
when would we have the cobbled together complete version?
Oh, you mean that?
Something for Councilmember Eichelhardt and anyone else who is saying, what are we voting on? When would they have it in a written form?
Well,
They
we can
go
publish
online
all of these immediately.
It's all in written form
but-
right now.
Yeah, but frankly, things aren't as they are, so we have to pass it to know what's in it. That's what we're going to have to do.
That would be a legal question, but what I'm understanding is the motion to defer will be to the 24th, and what will be available is what Councilmember Diamond has enumerated. Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm kind of in the middle on this, but I would like to see at least a consolidation of all these documents in numeric order as they fit in the book, so we can take a copy of the latest draft of the book and then go down with all the changes and make sure all the changes are there. And right now it's 7 different pages and they're not in the same order, so it's not easy to do.
So when do we think we would have what Mr. DiPolito is asking for?
I believe it's relatively straightforward to resort the spreadsheet portions in the correct order by page number and by section number, so that if you're comfortable with the rainbow that we'll generate because of the colors will now be commingled, I think it'd be within a couple of days that we could have that back and available to post.
I'm comfortable not having colors.
And that would be just fine. If this wants to simply be the second reading spreadsheet, it can be, and with all of it together at the same time.
And there are a number of items that we've said we're not going to make changes to, so just eliminate the confusion and just drop those.
Yep.
So just have a listing of all the changes so we can go through chronologically and see where we are.
So that what you would be looking at on the 24th would be the prior text document and a single spreadsheet of the changes in order by page number and section.
Yes. Question, when would that be available? I know we've been proposals voted on the 24th. When it would be available to the general public?
I think we can have it available in a couple of days' time here.
Thank you, sir. All right, other questions? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Yeah, my real concern on that is, there are a number of things that we said, well, we'll work on that, or we'll get that, or we'll, like I suggested, can we please rearrange the pages that talk about height so we can figure out what it actually intends? Are we going to see what that is, or are we just saying, we're passing to say, yeah, we're going to do that? And there are, out of all the things I've always carried with me, somehow I don't have the one sheet on the buffers, but I know what was in my notes is not what's on here, but I can't challenge it tonight because I don't have exactly. So I just know there are things that are on here that we didn't intend or we don't understand as a group is what we did. It's just human nature. I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. It's just the way things, when you have so much you're dealing with, there's no way it's correct. And this is embarrassing to say that we're going to move forward on this when it's a total change to our code.
Councilmember Price.
Just a couple of clarifications, please. Up in the northwest area of the city, I know at one point during one of our small work sessions, we talked about some of that FCA going to ag as opposed to, as was proposed on one of the earlier maps, RS 30, which, and I'm not sure where that shows that we've adopted or agreed to that recommendation. Did we have a disposition on that? We would have to have the vertical division in the garage doors, and then it looked like some sort of retribution it got included into some other designations that we would also have to have that vertical pole in the garages. How did we end up with that, since I was not at the short-called work session?
I'm thinking that was in the design guidelines comment, that we could create double doors that looked like single doors. Was that the conversation you were thinking?
The language that was added to the second.
No, yeah, the previous work session, I said, well, maybe the design folks could look at that, but again, I don't know what was finally decided.
The original discussion was to remove this line from line 1. The consensus was to actually add this line to line 2.
Right.
That's how it's being proposed.
So because I brought it up, it's now going to be more restrictive for a person's choices in having their garage door functional as opposed to looking aesthetic, which we can certainly do aesthetic garage doors without putting a pole down the middle. So right now, the wording in the newest version is going to have an additional restriction of having a vertical pole in that structure number 2, or B, or whatever, the second one. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Is that everybody on council's understanding? I mean, I couldn't find it. Okay, and the other one was, if you take the current map that we've been given, and then the one you were showing this evening, we now show that North Fulton Hospital is OP, and I don't know how we got to that. Was that part of the discussion at the work session? Or did it just sort of morph into OP somehow?
I think it was the office buildings that are on that property.
We can pull up the map. Get the pointer and identify the North Fulton Hospital property.
This is the hospital location that is currently zoned OCMS. This is the OP on the south side of Henry. I'm losing track of when we did things, but I think the request was to make that OCMS, OP, and give it the height that it currently has, and that's what this map reflects.
Does the OP
Allows the hospital, right, and the office and the medical.
Yeah, because it's not all hospital. There are a number of other parcels there
But it's all OCMS,
currently.
yes.
So since the previous map and the letter they would have gotten reflected commercial heavy, how significantly different is this that they are faced now with a totally different change that they're not aware of?
I don't know.
Well, does anybody care that they be informed that a totally different category has been designated for them that may have ramifications for their usage?
Well, since it was a policy decision of council, you may want to direct that to council.
Well, I've asked a lot of questions of council. I haven't heard an answer yet.
Councilmember Diamond would like to be recognized.
I think once our policy was, the consensus was go to the closest thing to what they have now. This does the closest thing to what they have now without taking away rights that they have. Now, we're not giving them additional rights, but we're not taking them away either. So this was the closest matching zoning to what they have presently.
So we didn't think that CH was that when we made it CH? Thought that was what we were trying to do. Why do we now think OP is closer than when we made it CH?
I think initially.
You would have to poll individual council members who were at the meeting, but it's my understanding they believe that was the closest correlation to the current zoning.
We've made some adjustments in uses and things along the way too, so to keep it consistent.
Can I have a list of those usage changes?
You may request that of council.
I'd like a list of the usage changes in that designation, please.
You'd like a list of usage changes in the OP from what originally proposed to what it currently is?
Correct. Or anything else that
We'll
happened
get that-
Saturday that's new.
We will get you that list of changes from original OP to current OP.
And any other changes that happened Saturday that are new and different.
I think that you'll need, if you would like to know those, then the record is available for your review.
And on
Well,
You-
apparently
And on YouTube.
And on YouTube.
Well,
So
apparently the film was turned off, and as the lady.
there were no changes made after the film was turned off, to my knowledge.
And why was the lady in the audience asked not to continue filming?
Kay, if you'll respond.
Yes, the work sessions and the council meetings are public meetings that are recorded. And at that time, when we lost a quorum, we were no longer in a work session or mayor and council meeting. We were more in a staff meeting. The public was not asked to leave. They were still remaining there to hear the discussion, but we did not want it misrepresented if a video is out on YouTube after we have ended the work session, that was some public meeting that was being recorded. The city should drive, based on our policy, when the recording starts and stops. That's the official record. We don't tape our staff meetings or other meetings that are not the meetings of the mayor and council, and that's why the person was asked to quit recording. However, they could continue to be there and hear the conversation.
So may I ask who was at that meeting when the recording was turned off?
Certainly you may ask. Who was present after? Who was there to the bloody end? I see some hands out there in the audience. I was not present. Well, which were the council members present?
Just three of us. Three of them.
It was Diamond, Wynn, and Eigelhart.
And throughout the day, there were members of the public there, I assume?
Correct.
Is there a record of that?
Correct, there is. That the public hearing and the public part of the work session is recorded and available. Both on...
We don't have their names. Just like tonight, we don't have the names of everybody here.
But it's available for review.
Yes.
It is or isn't? Ms.
It is.
Love says it isn't.
Councilman, the work session portion of the meeting, which is all, after that, the meeting adjourned, but the work session is available for your review.
Correct. However, we don't have individual names of the public present at that work session, just like we don't any work session. The public doesn't sign in.
It only if the public, if a
Speaks.
person spoke, would
Correct.
their name be taken down. Just as tonight, we don't take roll of everybody who attended tonight. Other questions? All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, sir, I second.
We have a motion and a second, and the motion was to, is specific as to what they're proposing, but they're asking for a vote now to defer the vote until the 24th. Any further discussion of that? Councilman Eigelhart.
I was prepared to vote for a deferral, but I thought that was when we were going to get a real copy of what it is we'll be voting on, so now I can't even support that.
Other comments before we take a vote? Councilmember Price.
Does a vote for deferral imply acceptance of all these changes?
No. It's simply voting to defer.
We are deferring, though, to a definite point.
If the motion is to defer until the 24th.
I'd like to make an amendment, please. Make motion for an amendment.
You may make a motion.
I move that we have a subsequent meeting prior to the final reading that includes a total package of what we will be voting on.
Let me see if I've got this straight. We're going to be voting on the 24th, and that would be a final vote if it passes, but you're asking for a meeting after that?
No, I'm asking for either a work session or a completed draft of what we would be voting on.
There will be I will be calling a work session before the 24th. After we get
without a completed
a publication, which we hope this week. So Kay, we need to look for a work session next week.
Yes, sir.
It'll be toward the end of the week because I may be taking a winter vacation. So we have a motion and so that does not require a motion. I will be calling a work session.
No, my amendment is to have a completed draft prior to the deferral date.
I support that because we'll have a completed draft. No, we won't have a completed draft. No, I can't support that then. We will have the draft with a summary of changes, but we have a motion that we defer a vote until we have a final draft, which I'm not sure you all will support even then, but we'll have a final draft of this motion. So the motion is to defer until an indefinite date, until we have a complete revised UDC with the changes proposed tonight. Any questions regarding the motion? Councilmember DiPolito.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, when might that occur? I know Mr. Einsweiler said he couldn't have it in 2 weeks, but when would that potentially be?
My sense is the work could occur in our office that following week, and that would set you up well if you chose to meet, for example, on March the 10th and have your final meeting. Then you would have had the document about a week beforehand.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the motion to defer until an indefinite date until there is a complete draft? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Councilmember Price, Councilmember Eichelhart. All opposed? That would be Diamond, DiPolito, and Wynn, and Orleans. The motion fails. We have a hand up. Yes, Councilmember Eichelhart.
Can I make the same motion but for a specific date of 3/10?
Yes, we'll entertain that motion. A motion to defer. Now, if there's a specific date, would it be conditioned upon this being the draft being available by a date certain?
Yes, because that's the reason.
So I need to have more of a motion.
If Mr. Einsweiler could give us a day that he'd be comfortable with to provide us with that clean copy.
So the motion would be to defer until the 10th, provided we have a completed copy by a date certain, which would be
March the 3rd.
March 3rd.
That's the motion.
All right, there's a motion to defer to March 10th, conditioned upon a complete revision based upon tonight's changes being available by March 3rd. Is there a second? We have a second by Councilmember Price. Any further discussion? Councilmember Diamond.
I believe March 10th is our drop dead date for the first reading expiration, and given the weather and all things that go on, I'm just not comfortable going to that absolute date. I'd like us to try for, I think a summary of changes in one place is not a lot to ask for. And if we need more time at that point, we have that option. But if we make it March 10th, we have no options.
So you're opposing the motion. Councilmember DiPolito.
Councilmember Diamond answered my question. I was wondering if there were any concerns about pushing it to the 10th. And my second question is, if we receive all the changes, we have our work session, then on the 24th, if we need additional time, can we defer again?
And I assume, yes, you can defer again, but as I understand it from Councilmember Diamond, you couldn't defer it past the 10th.
We can't defer past the 10th, but
you can defer it.
In
We
2
could have a
weeks, if
special
we
call
decide
meeting.
we still have questions about how the document's written, we can defer again.
We can have, the council can have a special call meeting if we don't have a regular meeting coming up before the 10th.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion before we vote on Councilmember Eichelhart's motion? All in favor of Councilmember Eichelhart's motion to defer to the 10th, raise their hands. Councilmember Price, Councilmember Eichelhart in favor. All opposed. Councilmember Orleans, Wynn, DiPolito, and Diamond are opposed. That fails. All right, now we're going to be voting on the motion to defer until the 24th. Any further discussion on that? All in favor of deferring until the 24th, raise their hands. That's Diamond, DiPolito, Wynn, and Orleans. All opposed. Price and Eichelhart. Motion to defer until the 24th. Go to work.
You ready for the next one, Mr. Mayor? It's our last one.
Yes.
And
You jumped right into it, but you just bailed out as soon as you jumped into it.
Well, since Councilmember Diamond's on a roll, I'm just going to let her take this one over to you. You want me to take it? I'll take it. Never mind. I'll do this one. Approval of text amendments to the City of Roswell zoning ordinance required for the adoption of the UDC. This is the second reading, presented by Mr. Townsend, and then Mr. Davidson, if you could read the ordinance for us, please.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the city City of Roswell Code of Ordinances. The Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia is hereby amended to delete references to the zoning ordinance and refer to the Unified Development Code and shall read as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this would be the second reading.
All right, is this part and parcel with the first motion? Is this dependent upon the first motion?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it
So
is.
So we would need to defer the reading of this to the 24th also?
Yes, sir. My motion was to defer this to coincide on the 24th with the UDC text.
Motion to defer till the 24th. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DePolito. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to defer to the 24th, raise their hands. Councilmember Orleans, Wynn, DePolito, and Diamond, all opposed. Price, Councilmember Eichelhart is abstaining, so that is deferred till the 24th. And so I believe we've covered everything other than the recommendation for closure to discuss personnel and real estate. Do we have a motion for closure? Motion by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DePolito. All in favor, raise their hands. That's passed unanimously. We're back to a unified council.